Well, Kate North, good to be with you again. It's been some time since we talked. I mean, here we are. How many months are we into this
We're
pandemic?
going on 6, Chris.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And um, I find myself today in my home office. I do work about 2 or 3 days down at the downtown office at our Colliers office. Um, and I know we've been talking a lot lately about, kind of where we are now. The first time we did this conversation, we were, new into the pandemic. You had data to share and kind of, what we were doing. I think everyone was rallying to get home and get their people working from home, investing in technology for people to work from home. Now we're many months into this. And I'd like to just see if you can bring us up to speed on
Sure.
what occurred with COVID in the
Oh,
workplace during that time.
yeah, it has been such an interesting ride, Chris. Yeah, if we step back and we just look at, what happened. Well, we deployed. We didn't have a choice to debate or discuss. We all started working from home. And as we know, and kind of from our earlier video that we did, is that we did it. I think organizations and leaders were so surprised at how well people could work from home. And we certainly have captured a lot of that type of data around productivity and well-being and still feeling connected, et cetera. But as we start to enter into month 4 and certainly month 5, we're seeing it in 6, is that the novelty of working from home has started to dissipate. It's worn off. And now organizations are really trying to figure out how do they keep the momentum if they are not returning to the office yet. And so what we're seeing is great conversations happening. I think organizations and leaders are starting to really begin to collect their data and understand how well people are doing working from home, who can work from home, who should work from home, who's having a difficult time in being able to function and focus. And so one of the key things that we're doing is we're beginning to step back and reflect on how do we help people work at their best, especially when we're kind of in this roller coaster around not knowing when to anticipate the return to work. It's felt, we're living in very stressful times. There's a lot of anxiety around the virus. There's anxiety around social unrest. And when organizations aren't clear around when people will be coming back in, that can heighten the stress of the employees in terms of understanding what is going to be expected for them. And so I think what we're starting to see is organizations declaring a further return to office date. They're pushing it out a little bit for some. Where we've seen that like with Twitter and Facebook, where they've just said, okay, it will be next year. I think many of them have done that as a way to help stabilize their employees and to help them feel a little bit more grounded in working from home, and then looking at how do they help people work well while they are working from home. But we're into this new phase of really understanding if we're going to be here for a while, how do we do it well?
Yeah, I'm listening to, and I'm hearing you, and I'm also hearing my colleagues. Anybody I talk to, we all kind of have used the term Groundhog Day, probably a lot.
Yeah.
One day bleeds into the next, and I do feel like having a place to go provides that structure, and has allowed me to realize that I did enjoy some of that routine and that sense of place. Yeah, that sense of place outside of the home office where you can go. And we've talked about the importance of culture and collaboration and things you only get when you're in person.
Yeah.
But you hear the talk about the death of office space, but I don't know. What do you think? Talk about occupancy and demand. What about space and hoteling and
Sure. So if we step back and we just think about what we've learned through all this, is that on the good side of the work from home experiment is that people recognize that they can work from home, that they can also focus if they've got the right setup for it, right? So that they can, the disruptions that oftentimes were the issue of productivity in the office, they feel like they can avoid some of those. But clearly from our data, we're finding that they want a both and. You probably have heard a lot about this whole hybrid model. They want choice, and that's not anything new. We've known that from the social scientists for decades, right? People want to be able to have choice. So much of it depends upon the organization, the culture, leadership. If employees feel that their leaders are truly 100% behind them working from home and they're measuring by result, that is a very confirming way and foundational way. But if the leaders are hinting that they want everybody back in the office, it is one where you need to have that level of clarity. I think we've seen everyone recognizes how good it feels to be together, and that no matter how great we get at Zoom, this ability to be able to just feel the vibe, connect with each other, and really engage is much easier to do when we're face to face. And we certainly have seen, kind of slicing the data, that men versus women prefer to be in the office. And which is interesting, women feel that they can be equally, if not more productive, actually working from home. We're also finding that the younger generation, those that have less experience or are new to the workforce, of course, they want more mentoring, they want more experience, they want more coaching. When you're at work, you are able to absorb so much that you can't see when you're working from the home office. So what we're starting to see is this conversation is there a way that we can actually begin to offer both? We know people are loving not commuting, and they like being able to build in better work-life balance. Eat from the fridge, they feel healthier. There's a number of good conversations, but we also know on the flip side of it that people are feeling isolated, and that some managers just don't know how to get to the hearts and minds of some of their employees. They can't read the situation well enough to really do the type of collaboration that they're intending. So the hybrid model offers both. And I think that's what we're starting to see a number of conversations. I know from a strategy perspective, we're working with many organizations trying to understand and develop different types of scenarios so that they could begin to think about, who are the best candidates to be working from home? What types of work do they do? How does that differ between a marketing team versus a research team? They do very different things throughout the day. So once you can start to understand your own organization using your own data, you can then begin to model some different scenarios that will guide you towards how to create that hybrid workplace.
Okay, so hybrid is the search word of the day.
It is.
So can you talk about what that, maybe a little bit, an example of what that might be? Maybe, give us a little clarity around that word.
Yeah. So, for some perhaps that have been doing hoteling in the past, or if they've actually had gone to a model where they didn't assign people desks, that people came in and they could choose where to work throughout the day. We see that a lot with consulting firms, teams that are highly mobile. But in the hybrid model, basically what we're doing is we are looking at kind of that threshold of when someone should have a dedicated desk versus when they would prefer to have their primary desk at home. So it's that 3-day factor. So if you said, Kate, I really love the flexibility of working from home, I'm so much more effective, then I'd say, okay, Chris, would you be willing to give up your assigned desk, right? And you'd say, yeah, but will I have a place to work? And I'll say, yes, all you need to do is make a reservation. Here's, your kind of the designated area of your team. This is how you begin to make that reservation based upon when you and your team will be in the office. And you can choose, your location. You can look at how to book also for other rooms and things that you may need when you're coming into the office, knowing that you're there to really collaborate. So it's really one around the allocation of an assigned desk versus an unassigned. I think we saw, pre-COVID, so many organizations, once they realized how low their true utilization rate was, they were like, okay, how do we begin to improve the utilization? And many organizations kind of just approached it, well, let's increase density. Well, we know density does not work, especially in COVID and post-COVID worlds. We don't want density. I don't think we're ever going to see the level of density that we've had. So the other model is saying, how do we use our resources and our space really well? So that's the model, is really around providing people choice, and that if they choose to work more than 3 days a week, then they make reservations, et cetera. So that's kind of where that conversation starts. And there's many different variations on hybrids that are based on teams and neighborhoods, et cetera. But that's a starting point.
So as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking, okay, obviously workplace design and looking at the office is really important. Is this stuff going to stick around after a vaccine? Are we going back to, do you think we gravitate back to what was normal before, or are these permanent changes to the degree that you can guess on that? I mean,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Well, I think it's all about culture and leadership. My first comments is that if the leaders really want to rethink this way of working, and that they have high degrees of trust in their organization, and they are managing by result, and they don't really care where the work gets done, but it's more about the accomplishment of these results. That's different than, an organization that wants everyone there. That in that model, Chris, it probably stay to a 1-to-1 ratio of assigned desking. So we're at this really interesting threshold where, it's fascinating to begin to start to create the types of scenarios. Initially, I think some clients said, okay, let's just have people work from home. And then they thought, okay, but how do we celebrate? How do we maintain that culture, et cetera? And some organizations are considering that, but I think people have moved more back to center, which I do believe, to your point, will be more sustainable over time. And let's really reimagine why people would come to the office. And that is about community. It is about connection. It is about culture. So that space to create those kinds of environments, it's going to be probably a reallocation of the space. So instead of having more of your space dedicated to assigned desking, it may be reallocated towards more community and collaboration type spaces. I think that's what we'll see. And if we also build into the factor of COVID and wanting to be able to, and not knowing when we're going to have the vaccination, for those organizations that want to move back relatively quickly, how do they maintain that 6-foot distancing? All of those different types of factors, throughout the space. So we're finding that the space of the size of the space is not changing dramatically in that equation. And it's really kind of the reallocation and the repurposing of that space that's starting to emerge.
Okay. Yeah. Let's come back on the home, kind of the findings of work from home. And I mean, you guys have just come out with the U.S. Global Work from Home study. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that? And were there any findings that surprised you? And also, maybe we ought to talk about where people that might be viewing this can access those findings.
Sure. And I'll take that one first. If they go out to the Colliers Utah website, we'll have it posted there. And I think also too, I've got it on my social media. You've got it on yours. Yep. There's lots of ways to be able to receive the full report. And then also we've got just a kind of a quick little infographic. But it was interesting because, when we took this survey, we were the first really to launch. We've got over 5,000 respondents globally. And it was between March and May. And so what our process was in the report is to really reflect and say, okay, so this is what this is a snapshot at that point in time. Now knowing that we're into month 5 and 6, what might this mean and what do we see emerging? So the report is a great read in the sense of understanding how we need to begin to think more deeply about some of these factors. So initially, over 3/4 of the population said that they were as productive, if not more productive, working from home. Now, once we started to really think about children being at home, now schooling sometimes at home, there's different factors. And so we found that certainly people with children or elder care that was also requiring the time, that was more, that can impact productivity. And then also, as I mentioned before, with this younger generation, the productivity perhaps goes to a certain point, but how do they ensure that they're still connecting and engaging and getting coached throughout that way? So think of the data as kind of that snapshot. The other thing that was surprising to me were some of the gender components that I've shared a little bit around how well women could work from home. And this, we aren't making, we don't want to make big general statements like that, but I thought that was really an interesting component of it. And that men really wanted more of that, one-on-one, kind of more desire to actually separate work from life. We saw that also.
Right.
And then I think that the other part about it is when we started looking at those people that had worked from home prior to COVID, or organizations that already had a flexible workplace, flexible work program, that the more they did, the more productive they were, the more satisfied they were on all different levels of feeling connected to their team, of feeling, their well-being was higher. They didn't feel like that they were missing. And as we really went through this research and vetted a number of different scenarios, we know that working from home and distributed work is truly what we're calling it, is something that can be learned, and which is good. I think managers initially, 88% of the employees said that their managers could manage them virtually. And that was the initial. And then as they got into, wow, how do I maybe hire new people? How do I grow my team? How do I mentor and coach? I think once they hit that plateau, the other piece that we're seeing is this ability to say, okay, how do we further support these managers so that they can be, incredibly effective and powerful in terms of how they're continuing to grow and to mentor their teams. So those were some of the findings that we saw that I thought were kind of interesting.
So, Kate, as we were on this, on my screen, your internet is unstable, flashes up. I have twin daughters who are seniors who are doing their school from home. And I just had to send a text to the family to please get off of the internet.
The new reality, right?
Yes.
The fighting for bandwidth, I know.
And so, technology is obviously a big part of this, and how we do these meetings. But with that, and you just kind of touched upon that, it was interesting, the gender differences there. But, I would imagine this is going to be different for different industries. I think this might be different for people that have either roommates or children.
Absolutely.
I have actually heard a couple of, sort of more anecdotal stories within the tech sector that leaders are, sort of lamenting that their folks aren't quite as productive working from home. They need to get them in that office for, maybe that collaboration and energy. These are challenges that we have from work from home.
Definitely.
This is something the new norm. Something that's going to have to be dealt with going forward as well. Are you seeing these?
Yeah.
Sure you are.
And Chris, I think you have just nailed it, is that we are, there are adjustments that we are all making real time, whether or not it's in the moment bandwidth or it's longer term around, culture and making sure that you're able to get the very most out of your employees and that you can help them work at their best. But what I would recommend is that every organization steps back collects their data. Like when I hear whopping statements that my team can't be productive, I'm so curious around understanding, how do you know, and how are you defining productivity? How are you measuring it?
Right. Is that
Certainly,
data or is that a gut feel? I mean,
yeah, is it a gut
you
feel,
really need to look
or
at it.
do you have some hard metrics?
Mhm.
Certainly, we've heard from a lot of tech sectors how well they are doing, working from home. And it's probably that they have more of a culture along that they may be more mature. I think it's a lot harder when you are a startup and you are ideating to not be together. I think there's just that energy and that inertia. Again, if you've got a younger workforce, I think that's another, factor to be able to consider. But also too, thinking through, organizations are made up a lot of different groups. You've got finance, you've got developers, you've got, legal, you've got marketing, you've got all these different groups. And I think making the assumption that they're all working the same or having the same experience isn't correct. And that's why, collecting data, creating different scenarios, and testing them. Right now, people, I think everyone, again, it was a way to kind of reduce some of this anxiety, is being able to feel like they're still aware and understanding what's going on with the organization. So having leaders communicating, we talked about this before, weekly updates from leaders very authentically. How's it going for them? What are the challenges? What are what are we celebrating? All of those different aspects can be really helpful, but giving time and space for employees to also share their experience and recognizing where they are along that process, I think can be incredibly helpful for any organization to reimagine a new way of working.
Well, you just hit upon where I wanted to wrap this up, and that is what people need to do.
Yeah.
And they need to hire you. And
Right.
use these great tools to be able to really, this is an opportunity. I mean, we're always, companies need to recruit, retain um, uh, labor.
Yeah.
And this is an opportunity for them to look at their space and really think about what this needs to be going into this next chapter, this next evolution, if you will, of the office space.
That's right.
And it's worth the endeavor. And
Yeah.
I know, yeah, and that's, and I know that to be the case as well from people I'm talking to, and so much appreciate everything that you do. The data that you're using, like that you're pulling from those reports, this is truly global findings, correct? I mean,
Yeah,
you guys,
it's global findings, and then the U.S. report is just looking at the U.S. data. So we've scrubbed it for the U.S., but we're also comparing, like for example, our industry section, really understanding kind of globally what's emerging. Because that national culture, what happens in APAC versus EMEA versus U.S. is, also really interesting for those that have got global. It's a global organization. You need to think about things very broadly. But there's another thing that Chris might be helpful, knowing that we don't know when that vaccination will come.
right.
I know some organizations keep pushing back. They say after the election, after the first of the year, et cetera. And that is something that is the unknown. And one thing that I've been doing recently with organizations is just helping them think through the different scenarios. So what happens if there isn't a vaccination for 2 years? And what happens if the economy is strong? What happens if there isn't a vaccination and the economy weakens? Or just the reverse, but sometimes just stepping into that area that feels a little fearful and just thinking about what would be the most appropriate strategy for an organization can also help get leaders thinking differently. I think there's some paralysis because we're just in this state of the unknown.
Right, right. Well said. And I think that while that being is, you'll go into conversations every day, you also feel like the desire to do something
Yeah.
and wanting to move things forward. And so that's what we have to tap in as well, as empowering our clients with information and help them make good decisions. And
Yeah, exactly. And I think some organizations are already thinking about how do we shift our business strategy to be successful in the post-COVID world. And so they're actually investing more money. They're looking at innovation. They've got teams focusing on new solutions. And so people are not all, paralyzed. So I don't want to give that impression around that piece at all, because there's a lot of, I think, opportunity, again, to think about how can we, change our business model? How do we rethink work? How do we become that employer that this talent, this new talent that we may need, will just, want to flock to, right? So there's all of these ways of thinking more broadly, and we've got a little bit of a respite right now as we wait to do that type of reflection.
And data analytics, just, information gathering.
Yeah.
The human condition, is to evolve and to, recreate. And this is that opportunity. And, I appreciate the comment about companies that are looking forward and taking the opportunity to reinvest and actually not double down, but really engage.
Yes.
Knowing to come out on the other side in the leadership position takes that inflection now and an investment of time and resources and experts. Opinions and then coming up with a plan, and that's what this is all about.
That's what it's all about, coming up with a strategy, and I think building into that strategy, the reality that this is not going to be our last pandemic, that we're going to be dealing with other types of issues, and that the need, whatever model they create, is building in the highest level of flexibility will serve them well.
Right. Well said. I think Kate North, Vice President of our Colliers Workplace Advisory Group, it's a pleasure to talk with you again. And perhaps we'll continue these conversations as this rolls out. But
I'd love to.
A lot of fun, and I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I love how curious you are, and you're just driven to really deeply understand what's emerging, and keep doing that, because it will benefit us all. The one thing I want to say is that in September, we're going to be hosting a webinar. So if you're curious around what other people are doing, Chris and I are playing with a webinar that will be forthcoming, so you can hear from others in the community. And then we are also going to be launching the part 2 of our work experience survey, asking a different set of questions that, as well as some of the existing ones. We're just really looking at what is continuing to emerge, and I'm sure we'll be continuing to do this. So watch this space, huh?
Yeah, agreed. Excellent.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.